Good morning. Welcome back to the Mindful Monday series that we're doing here on the Transforming Anxiety podcast feed. This has been such a great little series, these short and sweet episodes all about mindfulness, kind of touching on meditation a bit. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that today. Overall, how these concepts, these tools, these practices fit into a lifestyle meant to help you overcome anxiety. We're actually going to talk about this even more next Monday. But today, we're talking about practice. And I want you to really consider this, that we need to practice. It's not just sitting and meditating. It's all of this, all of what we've talked about in this series. Awareness, presence, compassion. We could add to that kindness, taking a moment to breathe, checking in with yourself, all of these little practices. And they're not time consuming. I don't want you to hear practice as something arduous or something that's really fancy or official or formal. These are not time consuming. They're not complicated. And I'd argue they're not even quote unquote nice to have things in our lives. These are kind of sort of mandatory. These things are required if you want to live well, if you want real emotional health, if you want to live a life you want to live. And it is a matter of remembering to remember. Can I keep showing up? Can I keep practicing? And one of the best ways that I have found to remember is when you really feel how it feels when you're in practice, when you do practice, when you really feel the benefits, when you experience firsthand the consequences of showing up for yourself, paying attention to yourself, being kind and gentle and spacious with yourself. When you feel how that feels, when you practice regularly enough to maybe notice the days you don't do these things and you feel the lack of practice, that tightening, that constricting, the negativity, then you start moving more naturally towards the practice. So in his book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell writes, "Practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing you do that makes you good." Yeah. You'd only practice basketball once you make every shot, right? You practice so that you can make more shots. You don't practice the piano once you've flown through Rachmaninoff. You practice so that you could, maybe someday, possibly, work up to Rachmaninoff, right? You don't practice speaking French once you're fluent, like you get the idea here, right? You practice so that you have a shot in hell at speaking French coherently enough to order dinner when you're in rural France on business. That happened to me. The practice of mindfulness, of awareness and presence and compassion, these practices are acts of courage. And really, you showing up, your practice, it's the most powerful act of all. Practice with presence, practice with awareness. We practice simply showing up. Can I be here in this moment? And this one? And this one? When we can bear witness to our own pain and our own love, then it becomes possible to respond to this world without blame, without othering each other, without causing harm. Let me say that one again. When we can bear witness to our own pain and our own love, then it becomes possible to respond to this world without blame, without othering each other, without causing harm. We must see the possibilities even in the difficulties. Suffering is not the end of the story. We use it for compost. The pain and suffering go in the compost pile. Churn it up. Be with it. And then it turns into really nourishing fuel for what comes next. Listen, every single one of us is unique, quirky, weird, right? That's just true. Wherever you are, whatever your uniqueness, your quirks, and your weirdness, that's your garden. Compost the pain and suffering. Throw it on, right? Throw it on the garden all through the weirdness. Are you with me? We practice in this way. Composting and practicing. The pain goes in the compost pile. Then you put it on the garden of your own weirdness. This is a fun little metaphor for practice, right? So the most basic form of practice, even before we get to something like mindfulness or meditation, even before we consider something formal like on a cushion, right, is that we learn to stay. We learn to be here. As we practice with this, we rediscover presence. That's all presence is, after all, is learning to stay in this moment and this one and this one. That's the practice in its most essential and pure form. Can I be here? Now, let's talk for a moment about sensations and about emotions. Because here's the deal. As soon as you go to practice, right, as you're practicing, when you ask yourself to stay in this moment, the first thing you're going to notice are sensations and emotions. These are both so basic to the human existence. And really, sensation is maybe even more basic than emotion. Like all emotions, thoughts, and behaviors have this substrata of physical sensation. So here's the invitation. Here's what I want to offer you. Include the sensations in the practice. We aren't practicing with any of this work to move beyond the sensations or the emotions or the thoughts or behaviors. We must include it all. So if you notice that you're practicing being more patient and you notice that you're feeling physically uncomfortable, right? You notice maybe the emotion of frustration as you're practicing being more patient. That's good. That means you're doing it. Include the sensations, include the emotions in the practice. You see, if they're not included in the practice, then we get stuck in reactivity and we disconnect from our own inner intelligence. It's what one of my clients called crimes against wisdom. She read that somewhere and I thought that was just beautiful. It's so good, right? To go against what we believe and feel and do, like to not include those basic building blocks, is a crime against wisdom. Now, again, just to call out all the elephants in the room, you may notice, you ready, that it's not always pleasant. There are these images in the media about practicing with these kinds of concepts, right? These teachings. And it's like all bliss when you see it portrayed in the media, right? It's easygoing and relaxed, maybe even like super smiley people. This is what we've come to associate with mindfulness and with compassion and presence. And I'm here to tell you that's not how it goes, not even a little. It's far less pleasant than that. And we are conditioned to contract when we're faced with unpleasantness. We reach and we grasp towards the pleasant, and we contract against what's unpleasant. But here's what. When we are living in sheer reaction to what's happening, when we are in constant reactivity to the pleasant and unpleasant, we leave our bodies, meaning there is no presence. All we're practicing is that whole medicate and run bit, right? So practice, again, it's about learning to stay. Can I be here with whatever is here? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? Can I be with it? And instead of grasping or contracting, can I say, oh, okay, right now, it's like this. So there's a couple useful questions here. Number one, what happens when I continually pull back from or resist unpleasantness? And number two, what is possible by learning to stay? So when we boil it all down, these are the practices that are in front of us. You're either practicing pulling back from or resisting the unpleasantness in life, or you're practicing learning to stay. And when we get curious, when we're willing to ask what happens when I'm in resistance and reacting to the unpleasantness, we find out the consequences of that practiced contraction. And when we get curious and we're willing to ask what's possible when I learn to stay, we open up to what might happen when we can be with the reality of life, which is that it's sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant, and sometimes just totally neutral. This is why we practice. And listen, we don't always get it right, and it's certainly not always pleasant. Sometimes it feels pretty murky and uncomfortable and frustrating, but we notice we're okay. We're here. And we keep returning to that basic inner intelligence, right? No crimes against wisdom. So awareness, presence, compassion, practice. And listen, we're just getting started because I'm excited to tell you about how we can do more of all of this together in a 6-week course that I'm offering. It's called How to Meditate to Transform Anxiety. I'm going to open the doors to that for 1 week, starting next Monday on September 5th, which is Labor Day here in the States. And then the course will actually start the following Monday, September 12th. So just be sure you're subscribed here to the podcast, wherever you're listening, and be sure that you're on my email list. You can subscribe to that at kellyhanlonmccormick.com. So that way you'll be sure that you get all the info on the course. More importantly, you're going to be learning, this is what we're going to be talking about in the course, how you can meditate to transform anxiety. That's what we'll be doing together for 6 full weeks starting Monday, September 12th. And of course, I would love to have you join me for that, especially if you're ready to get a handle on your anxiety this fall. Yeah? All right, that's it for this week for practice. And I will be back next week with a really special invite for you to join that How to Meditate to Transform Anxiety course. Doors will be open for 1 week. We'll open them September 5th. We're going to close them September 12th when we start the course. And I will see you next week on Monday, same time, same place, for more, all the details, all the goodies, and all the things with that. And until then, please take care.